So thank you to IBEX for bringing us together again. Now that we're back, let's get to it. The carbon conundrum. The topic rose to the surface again and again during the education program planning this past winter. It was fed really, I think, by uncertainty about the future of our industry, an uncertainty that reflects a broader anxieties about the future of global environment and ways of living. I have to give credit to Kiko Villalon, one of our indispensable industry sages, who sadly couldn't be here with us today, sends his love to all. But he pointed out the subject to us as far back as 2019. He was worrying about the divergence of North American and European boat markets and sensibilities. One, he noted, was working toward fuel efficiency and lighter environmental impacts in production. The other, toward ever more horsepower on ever heavier boats built as cost effectively as possible. Today, that divergence is really manifest in the North American market, sort of both parts of it, where we have teams of investment-fueled innovators pushing the potentials of electric propulsion and hydrogen fuel, building minimalist carbon fiber foiling prototypes that promise sustainable, if not terribly thrilling, performance. And at the same time, just down the street, often, designers and engineers will work to satisfy markets' appetite to add yet another 300 horsepower outboard to the back of a center console. It's, this, I guess, really typifies the conundrum. Understanding and reconciling the two extremes is essential to plotting our way forward in the industry. To that end, we brought together a panel of industry leaders to share their thoughts about boat building in our collective lower carbon future. Jeff Wasil, not in order of appearance, Jeff Wasil, Director, of Environmental Health and Safety at National Marine Manufacturers Association. Next to him, Martin Peters, Director of External Affairs at Yamaha. Jeff Bowles, next to me, Director of DLBA Naval Architects. And down almost at the other end, Marnix Hoekstra, Partner and Creative Director at Vreepak Naval Architects in the Netherlands. And all the way, the bookend at the other end of the motley crew is my co-moderator, Tim Murphy from ABYC. And as I mentioned, sadly, Kiko Villalon, who was scheduled to be here, could not join us. So any of you who were here for his long historical view and context, I can only ask for your forbearance. Tim, I'm going to hand it over to you to give a little bit of context, and we'll get into the conversation. I should add before that, we'd encourage any of you during the conversation to, if you have questions, put up your hand. I or Tim will recognize you. It would be great to, I'm not sure if we have someone who can ferry the mic around, but because this is being recorded, we really will need someone to get input to the mic itself. But please join us in the conversation. If you have questions in general or for specific participants, please share them. Thanks.
All right. Well, yes, I'm Tim Murphy. I'm the Education Project Manager at American Boat and Yacht Council. And this is a conversation we've been having all winter and obviously in the industry a lot longer than that. So we wanted to try to resolve some of these things. These words that are up here can mean so many things to so many people. And, so on stage and in the room, we have world-class nerd credentials in fluid dynamics and structures and petrochemical research and government, government policy making and all these things. And so I think it's fair to bring in one more nerd category, which is post-structural semiotics, and this notion of a floating signifier. So all those words, you know, sustainability and decarbonization is a floating signifier, right? It's a word or phrase with a vague, highly variable, unspecifiable, or non-existent meaning. And so our goal here, both on stage and in the room with you guys, we hope this is an open conversation, is to, if not get an anchor down, at least take some bearings and you know, get some lines of position on what these things mean. Obviously, these notions are very important in the industry. Brunswick, the biggest marine, you know, recreational company in the world, in 2021 appointed a chief sustainability officer, so that you know, it's obviously an important thing to them and their strategy. You know, they're working. We're going to talk in more detail about many of the sort of granular choices that companies are making, but they're investing in, you know, sort of the materials they use, using sort of flax in the fibers, recyclable resins. Group Beneteau, that's another very large company, has created a very robust strategic commitment where they aim to get 30% of the carbon emissions out of their operations by 2030. So in the resins that they're using, they've moved from last year to this year from 14% you know, biosourced material in the polyester resin that they use to 35% this year. So these are real changes happening at scale. It still sort of raises questions, though, about how you know, these big terms that we're using are measured and how they're marketed. There's a lot of fuzziness around it. So thankfully we have Jeff Wasil with here, who's been looking into this for quite a long time, and I think we can just put the question to you. As you've been watching this, what sort of surprised you in the industry, in what you've been watching?
Yeah, good question. Thanks, Tim. So I think one of the challenges our industry faces, honestly, is perception. The perception that recreational boating contributes unnecessarily to global climate change, the perception that recreational boating is a sport for the wealthy and is unnecessary. You know, a lot of folks are entering this industry for the very first time, and they're basically exploiting this perception that recreational boating is bad. And basically you hear things like, oh, we're entering the recreational boating space to save the planet and our children from the damages that recreational boating causes. Really? That's why you're entering the recreational boating market? That perception, I mean, they've even written books about this. Polluting for Pleasure was a book that was written. And a lot of this is derived from, you know, you look at, you know, the conventional carbureted two-strokes of years past, where you start up the engine and it's like a tire fire. Everybody knows that, you know. You like, you go out there and you got the sheen on the water and the smoke. And I know that's like a lot of people do. I do too. I grew up with that, and it's like it brings back memories of boating. You know, it's like exactly, it's smoking, it's running. You know, and unfortunately, I mean that was a reality for many years. And you look at what's happened in the industry now. I mean, nobody's building those products anymore. I mean, the engines run like sewing machines. The boats are precise. The technology is incredible that you see been added to the boats. But unfortunately, we still have this kind of perception issue that we have to deal with around the globe. And so here's some facts, and this is really important. So of the 1,900 million metric tons of carbon dioxide emitted from the transportation sector in the United States, recreational boating accounts for 0.7%. Yeah, we got the graph up here on the screen here. 0.7% is attributed to recreational boating in the United States. 0.4% is attributed to recreational boating in Europe. As an industry, we're burning roughly about 0.5% of the gasoline. Those charts there, John McKnight and I had painted those in those giant bar graphs. And you can see at the very bottom, there's a little tiny sliver. That's recreational boating, okay? So again, the reality perception, okay, that we're making these awful products that are unnecessarily contributing to global climate change versus the reality of 0.7%. Now, with that said, that doesn't give us an excuse like, oh, you know what, we're really small, we don't need to worry about this because we're just a little fraction of it. Everyone needs to do their part to minimize CO2 emissions, okay? It's imperative that we do that. There's a few differences that are worth pointing out that are really important. You take a look at what's happening in the automotive industry. You see the push toward electrification. A lot of folks automatically assume, hey, you know, automotive is going to electric. Recreational marine is going to do the same thing, right? It's the same thing. We'll just, you know, put electric motors on boats and we'll start reducing emissions. There's something fundamentally different that needs to be understood. And that is when you do a life cycle assessment, meaning looking at all the processes that go into producing the boat, all the processes, all the electricity that the plant uses to produce the boat, the fuel that the boat uses, and all the components that go into it, all the way to the end of life. For automotive, everything is based on 150,000 miles, okay? So you look at the car, how much CO2 was embedded in to produce the vehicle, and then how much CO2 was emitted during that 150,000 miles of operation, okay? Boats are used on average 35 to 48 hours per year. Very, very small. In fact, my boat, I'm in just north of Chicago, and 7 months of the year it's covered up, covered in snow and not used. I maybe put 5 hours on my boat this year, actual runtime. Sad to say, but that's the reality. What are the majority of cars doing right now across our cities? We pull up that slide real quick, Tim. When you take a look at the picture on the left, that's what they're doing, you know? What are the majority of recreational boats doing right now as we're having this conversation? Absolutely nothing. They're sitting there at marinas, they're sitting at the dock, they're sitting covered with leaves in a tarp in somebody's backyard, you know, because it's getting, you know, it's October already. Or like in my neck of the woods, they're covered in snow, winterized for 7 months of the year. That fundamentally changes the assumptions that go into determining what the actual emissions are from that product from a life cycle perspective. It's critical, it's absolutely critical and imperative that you understand how that boat's going to be used, the number of hours it's going to accumulate, how it's going to be used over that period of time, before you can really make a definitive determination whether or not a specific type of technology will actually meaningfully reduce carbon dioxide emissions. And that's what's different about our industry, and that's what a lot of people don't understand when they just, you know, take a look at what's happening in other sectors and assume it's the same. You know, there are a lot of different technologies that are going to be necessary to minimize CO2 emissions from our sector. It's not a one-size-fits-all solution. It's not a simple apply one technology and done. It's very specific to the types of boats that are in use. So, kind of a quick, I know, long-winded answer to your question, Tim, but
there you go. That's a good start. I think that starts to frame it up a little bit broadly for the whole boat.
So we look at the future as achieving carbon neutrality, and we've got to have multiple technologies, not a single technology. We can't rely specifically on batteries and electrification to get us where we need to be.